Hi, class. It's Teacher Jamie, Professor Z. I'm going to give you a little lecture on active learning strategies. And I want to talk about things that you should do before you read, things that you should do while you read, and things that you should do after you read. And these are things that are going to help you in my class, and they're going to help you in all of your classes in college. So, the first thing to do is to think about pre reading. So, a lot of students, when they're given an assignment, hey, read chapter one, they just jump right in, go to chapter one, and go straight to the end. I know sometimes they'll do a quick flip through to just see how many pages it is, because they're hoping it's not going to be too painful. But another thing you can do is do a little pre reading, which is going to give you an overview of what you have to read, and it might help you to like connect what you're doing to like things you've already done, like whatever your prior knowledge is of the subject matter. Um, and this is what pre-reading looks like. So you're trying to survey to take a look at what's coming, and then you're trying to make predictions. That's like the active part. Okay, so here's what I mean by that. So you look at the book, you see the author is Malcolm Gladwell, say, right, and the title is Outliers, right? So you might be asking yourself, first off, you might say, who is Malcolm Gladwell? You might do a little research on who he is. You'd find out that he's a journalist, a popular journalist, um, and then you look at the title, Outliers. Okay, so what does Outliers mean? And then it also has a subtitle, The Story of Success. So what is Gladwell gonna say? What's his theory? What's his thesis gonna be about success? What is the story of success that Gladwell chooses to tell? So doing that can frame your reading for you, because you know that that's what you're looking for. You're trying to answer that question. Okay. The other thing you can often do is look at the beginning and the ending. So for a chapter, say you have to read one chapter, you might read the first paragraph and the last paragraph. If it's a textbook, there's often going to be a short introductory section and then a concluding section. And if you read those at the beginning, it's going to frame for you. It's going to show you like, oh, okay, here are the important things that I want to know by the end of the chapter. Okay. In a book like Gladwell's, a lot of times he'll start with a story, like with an anecdote. And so you might want to ask yourself, what is that? What is this anecdote going to have to do with the point that he's making in the chapter? Sometimes it won't be immediately clear, and you're going to have to read to figure that out. But he's setting something up for you. So you want to think about like what's being set up here. Okay. And with the ending, it's like, what's the takeaway here? What's the conclusion? Another really powerful, useful pre-reading strategy is to look through a chapter. This especially works for textbooks, and look at the headings and subheadings within the chapter and turn them into questions. Okay, and I want to show you just briefly what this would look like. So this is Gladwell's book, right? Here's Outliers, and I already kind of talked about the cover, but I want to look at the table of contents, right? So each chapter has a title, and it has like a little subtitle, right? So um, what I also notice if I look here is you have part one, opportunity, right? And then it looks like there are, one, two, three, four, five chapters. And then we have part two, legacy, right? And then it lists four more chapters and an epilogue, which is like a concluding chapter. So that shows me the structure of the book, and it's useful to just understand that this is like an outline of the book. The other useful thing is I can look at this and see like the first chapter is called The Matthew Effect, right? So I can turn this into a question. I can create like a study guide for myself. What is the Matthew Effect? Clearly, by the end of my reading of the first chapter, I should be able to explain what that is. So if I have that as a question, I should be able to answer it. If I can't, I know I have to go back and do a little bit more work, right? And you'll notice for each chapter, there's like a subheading here too, which is a quote that seems to have something to do with the title, right? It might be something that somebody in the chapter says. Same thing, chapter two, the 10,000 hour rule. What is the 10,000 hour rule? Chapter three, what is the trouble with geniuses? These are questions that I should be able to answer by the time I get to the end of those chapters. Okay. And yeah, so turning headings and subheadings into questions can be a really valuable tool in helping to focus your reading and keeping you kind of it's easy to drift off when you're reading. I know a lot of students say they get to the bottom of the page and they're like, I don't know what I read. So having this tool, having this sort of study guide for yourself in mind can keep you focused. Okay, back here, let's just get this back into the slideshow view. Okay, so the other thing you can do when you're pre-reading is just take a look. Are there any visuals in the chapter? Are there any graphics, any charts? And you could start to ask yourself, what do they have to do with the main point of the chapter? And you're not going to know that yet, but you want to keep that in mind as you're reading. And then if you're really ambitious, you can also kind of skim the text, read first sentences of sections or of paragraphs. A lot of times those are topic sentences. And that will just give you an overview of what you're getting into. And then you can go back and you can start to read, okay? So those are pre-reading strategies. I highly recommend you put them into practice, okay? And then the thing you want to do while you're reading is you want to annotate. So annotation basically means you're reading with a pen or a pencil in your hand, and you're doing a couple of key things as you read. You're paraphrasing, putting into your own words, key ideas when you come across them in the margins. That's the most important piece, right? Is trying to digest the reading as you go along and make sure you understand what you're reading. And putting it into your own words makes it more likely that it's going to sink into your memory. And it's also it's a way to self-test. If you can't put it in your own words, maybe you don't fully understand it yet. So super important thing to be doing. It's probably the most important thing I can teach you how to do, quite honestly, to be successful in college. The other thing you can do as you're annotating is respond to the reading. So connect it to your experience. Like, oh, this is an example, this explains why this thing happened in my life, or connect it to ideas from other classes. Like, hey, this is similar to this concept from sociology that we're studying, or this is similar to a concept in biology or marketing, whatever it may be. Making those kind of cross-disciplinary connections, again, makes it more likely that you learn it, that you understand it, and that you're really engaging with the material. One challenge that lots of students have as they read is they come across words they don't know, and it inhibits them or keeps them from being able to understand what they're reading, right? So, a little later in the class, we're going to talk about context clues, which is where you kind of try and figure out a word based on what's around it, but that doesn't always help. And then, so at that point, you always want to make a habit of going to the dictionary. I use Merriam-Webster's app on my phone. You can certainly use Google. I just recommend you use something. And, using the dictionary sometimes is helpful. Sometimes you look up a word and it gives you more words you don't know, and then you got to go look up those words. It's a process. It takes some time and effort. Don't let it deter you or frustrate you. And then afterwards, you're going to process these annotations. But those are things you should be doing as you read. So, this is what that might look like. Here's a reading, a page, and you could see in the margin, the student has written an outline of the key points of each chapter. And you can see they also have underlined some of the ideas. What I notice also is a lot of students, they like to do the underlining, but they don't so much love to do the annotation. The underlining, what a lot of times that students do when they're using underlining is it's kind of like they underline it like, oh, that sounds important, I better come back to that later. You don't digest it as well when you just underline it. That's why that step of putting it into your own words in the margins is so important. Making connections, right? Connect related ideas with lines. So you can draw an arrow between the first paragraph and the fourth paragraph, showing that there's a connection between these two things. And this is also where you could be in the margins, like I said, kind of talking about connections to your own life or to ideas and concepts from other classes. Vocab, circle it out in the margin, write a definition in your own words too. Don't just copy the dictionary definition. Putting it into your own words is the most important thing to getting stuff to stick in your brain. And then I use a lot of symbols. So, some students will use an asterisk or a star for important ideas. Question marks are great. Question mark is hey, I don't understand this. I don't know what's going on here. And then it's something you want to ask about. You want to ask your professor. You want to ask your classmates, right? Exclamation point for things, where you're having a strong response. Maybe you disagree with something. Arrows showing related ideas. Sometimes in the margin, I might write out oh, these are the three steps, or this is a list of things, or these are the three supporting details in a paragraph. Um, just come up with your own sort of symbols that help you to annotate a text and digest the text. So, in the when it comes down to it, in the end, you can see here on the left side of the screen, you see the student's done just about as much, has almost doubled the number of words on the page. They've added as many words as there were there, right? And it looks like they've got some words circled where they might have vocab definitions in the margin. They've got key ideas in the margin. They've even done drawings. A lot of times doing a drawing is a great way to like remember something, because you connect that drawing that you did to the idea. So sometimes translating something from words into like a visual representation is a really great tool to make you learn something. The other thing is, some students really like don't want to write in their books, which is fine. You can do sticky notes and have a sticky note on each page where you're doing stuff. And I've had some students who do a really great job with sticky notes, so that's another option for you. So once you've done this, right, you've pre-read, then you've gone through and you've read and you've annotated, you're going to want to then process your reading, okay? There's a couple ways to do that. So one is you can often do what I call like a visual organizer, right? Over here on the left side, I have one that like nursing students often use, right? Where they'll put the disease here in the middle, and then each of these boxes represents one aspect of the disease that they need to know for a test, or basically to become a practicing nurse, right? So what's the diagnosis? What are the complications that may come up? What are the signs and symptoms? Risk factors, right? These are the things that every nurse has to know about every disease, right? When I was in college, I had a friend who was studying nursing, and she carried around this stack of index cards with all this information on it, right? And she was always testing herself. So she'd look at the one side, she'd have the answers on the other side. Same deal when you're doing, like, when you're planning an essay, you might do a visual organizer where, you say, here's my conclusion. Here are the things I'm going to say there. Here's my introduction. Here are my body paragraphs. And these are the key points for each one. And then this is the supporting details I'm going to have for each of those, right? It's a form of visually outlining something. So you may do the same thing with your notes, right? You may take your notes from a chapter. As you read, you may take your annotations and then put them in, like, outline them. So you might say, here's the first main topic, and then these are the subtopics. Here's the next main topic and the subtopics. So it's a way of processing what you've done, and going through it multiple times is how you really get to know it. And the last thing I want to talk about is the Cornell method of note taking, which is wonderful. Again, it takes a little more time, but I think the time is worth it. So I really recommend using this method. So in class, or when you're taking notes on the screen or whatever you're doing, leave a column over here on the left side blank, and leave a blank spot down on the bottom. So you would just write your notes here in the green section, okay? And this would be all your notes. So say you've been watching this video lecture and you've been taking notes, which I hope you have been. You would have all your notes here. And then afterwards, you would come over here and you would put, this is the reduce and recall column. So what you would do over here is review your notes and put the keywords and concepts over here. So you might put pre-reading over here, right? And that's like a quiz for you almost. It's like a question, like, so you would look at that and say, do I remember what I'm supposed to do when I pre-read? And if you can recall it, that's great. And if you can't, you'd come back over here to your note column and take a look and review it, right? Same thing, you might be like, what do I do when I annotate? And then over here in your notes, you'd have the answers, okay? So it's a bit of it's where you're reducing the notes to their essentials, and you're using that to see if you can recall stuff, okay? And then down at the bottom, you would do like a summary of this page of notes, okay? So that's the Cornell method of notes. It's a great way to process notes and to make sure you're fully getting everything that you're learning, okay? So that's just an overview of active learning strategies. Hope that's helpful, and I hope you're able to put that stuff into practice over the course of the semester and over the course of your college career.